Hello, and welcome to my Neurodivergent Diary with me, Kitty Cowell. In this podcast series, I'll be interviewing both neurotypical and neurodivergent people about all kinds of subjects, from dating to fashion to music and more, to see how we relate or don't relate in our experiences and thinking. So on today's show, I have my friend Titi. Hi. Titi Finlay. Do I say Finlay? Finlay. Finlay, yeah.
But people say Finlay sometimes.
It just sounds like, yeah. Sounds fancier. I'm so obviously I've known you for ages, but do you know when it's just like, when would you have that conversation?
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even know my real name, which is Christina. And everyone's like, who's that?
I did not know that.
Like, basically all of my friends are like, who's Christina? Like, it's just never been said. So.
That is so funny. I mean, me too, kind of, because I'm actually called Laura Kitty.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Your face.
And that's your middle name.
It's a double-barreled name.
Okay.
It's like Anne-Marie or, something like that.
Love
but
that.
My parents actually wanted it to be Kitty as my first name, but they liked Laura and they didn't think Kitty Laura sounded as good as Laura Kitty.
Yeah.
Which I guess kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But they just straight up changed it. Just called me Kitty from day one. You're like,
classic.
Brilliant, thanks. So, first of all, do you know, are you neurotypical or neurodivergent? Or do you know?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't ever been tested or done anything like that, but I think I'm for the most part neurotypical. But there's obviously, as we know, it's like a bit of a spectrum. And I think there's so many elements that sometimes I experience. For example, I know anxiety is not considered that, but I live with crippling anxiety, which it affects a lot of the way I act as a person, which is not typical, I would say.
Yeah, in a different way. It's not typical.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think there's a lot of elements like that kind of feed into my personality. I'm quite an introverted person, and in certain scenarios, especially with lots of people, I just sort of shrink into myself, and I feel like I really struggle with being around people like that, rather than being one-on-one with someone. And so there's lots of little elements, but yeah.
And just to tell everybody who you are properly, because I just went straight in for the neurotypical, neurodivergent question, didn't I? So, Titi, you are an artist and content creator. You've worked with people like Nike and Foot Patrol, and you are a sneakerhead. So, you tend to work within the sneaker streetwear world, right?
Yeah.
You work, we know each other because you I can't speak. You used to work at ASOS.
Yes.
And there you were more in the content world, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then you went on to do social media content again for a sneaker store, company. Yeah. And now you're a freelancer.
Yeah.
And an artiste.
Yes.
So I suppose because what you were just saying about being, probably neurotypical, but also experiencing things that are maybe not typical. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really interesting subject because that probably, and you can tell me, but that probably pushed you more in the direction of wanting to work for yourself, right?
Yes.
And
definitely.
that, as a neurodivergent person, is also what pushed me to want to do the same thing. I think the thing is, there are a lot of people now, with it being talked about a lot more, sort of people becoming, diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, that seems to be very talked about at the moment specifically. I am dyslexic and I've known that since I was 6, so for most of my life.
Yeah.
But I think I'm probably, and I'm got to go through that process again now, ADD or ADHD.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to know that, looking back as an adult on my schooling and the careers that I've, chosen to do and now working for myself. With you, yes, you do think you're more neurotypical, but like you say, there are other things that affect you that have probably, affected the trajectory of your life, let's say.
For sure.
So being more of an anxious person, which also I am and can relate to deeply, you think that probably made you want to step out of working with an environment full of people, basically.
Definitely.
Every day.
Yeah. I always struggled being not a team player. I've always been good at being by myself as a team, but being part of a team where there's more responsibility to step up and be the person that's leading the way and bringing the ideas. I've always struggled with the confidence to do that, and just being in an office environment, it was really fun for a while, but I always found myself, I would go away to quiet rooms to work, and I felt like it wasn't because I was being antisocial, it's just because I couldn't focus and I couldn't join in with the same conversations or get my head around being able to gossip for 2 seconds and then get back to my work. And I've always preferred to work alone. I think it's just maybe because I'm an artist and I've always like painted by myself, and that's just always been the way that I've been. And I really struggled in full-time work just with like people's personalities. And I was always like sort of a golden girl at work, I think. Like I was sort of like the quiet one that just went above and beyond, always did like what they needed to do. But I ended up getting like really bad burnout, and I really just struggled with, like I said, with other people's personalities and not knowing how to. I have very thin skin, I would say. So I'm a very sensitive, anxious person. I wouldn't sleep very well because I was always worried. And I found that going freelance has completely like eradicated all of that.
Yeah.
Because I work with people one-on-one for the most part, with smaller teams of people, and I know that they've hired me as the expert to come in now. So I feel like the imposter syndrome, or like what they might think of me, or they might think I'm doing a bad job, that doesn't happen anymore, which is really nice. Yeah. And I also love just I like get to work from home, and I get to work on my own terms at the times that suit me, without being bothered by people and having to like feel like you have to be part of the culture of your work. So all the stuff that I didn't enjoy, it's just gone away, and it's really nice.
That's so nice.
It really works for me.
It's interesting because there are a lot of people that are coming forward saying like they thought from seeing TikToks mostly that they might be autistic or ADHD, right?
Yes.
And then they just get diagnosed with like crippling anxiety.
Yes.
And that is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I have all the things.
Yeah.
I have PTSD, I have anxiety, I'm dyslexic, I'm neurodivergent. And and potentially other things, right? Yeah. And so it's really, really interesting as well, I suppose, like, because I think it tends to be people that I am surrounded by, people that are, whether they're my best friends or, you know, people that I've kind of like gravitated towards, I guess, in like industries, like, you know, we know each other through work mostly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like originally.
Yeah.
Are similar in that respect. Because there are so many people in the sneaker world, right? And you know of me and my friend Juice as being like some of the first girls, which is ridiculous, but like kind of known in that world. With that, it was so terrifying being surrounded by so many men. And I don't know if they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, but they were so confident, so like strong-willed, so like knowledgeable about those, you know, about their subjects, sneakers and streetwear. And I ended up, you know, knowing a lot of people in that world. I know tons of people, but being closer friends with people that are more like me. Yeah. So let's say it's not that we're shy and timid, like inherently, like I feel like we're talking, we can like have a lot to say, right? We're not like completely timid people, but when you are put into a space that is busy, loud, male dominated, I don't, like whether it is that you are an anxious person or a neurodivergent person, you know, or all of those things, like we gravitate towards each other. Yeah. So there's some kind of, what's the right way to put it? Like there's something that we're obviously seeing in each other. And I've always thought, especially over the past few years where people talk about neurodivergent people more, or just my friends all neurodivergent. So like it's interesting to know that like you're probably more neurotypical, but there are those other things that we, you know, relate on that like we just like to hide away in quiet rooms. It's so true. Yeah. Like that is me. Because I also worked in fashion PR, so I worked in an office, and I remember specifically when I was younger, I said the same thing to my mum, but I remember then, which was like 7 years ago now, which is mad, saying to my mum, my boss is telling me that I'm being disruptive. And it's because you're forcing me to sit at a screen constantly, and you're telling me to just like do that and focus on words and emails or ring people. And then like no one wants to pick up the phone in PR anyway. So you're just annoying people by doing that. So then you're just emailing all day. And I'm like turning around to my neighbor every half an hour and having a conversation about what we're doing because like, well, I think that's normal. Yeah. But apparently I was being distracting, and I was like, Mum, are you sure that I'm not ADHD? Like, I feel like I could be ADD, ADHD. Like I've been told before I've been distracting, like in school. And she's like, but you're not hyperactive, you know, so I don't think you are. And it's like, that is such a misconception.
For sure,
especially in women. But yeah, it's why I just didn't. There were other things, like I have endometriosis, right? So it's like all these things like anxiety, depression, being neurodivergent, dyslexic, having to focus on like text constantly on a screen. Even though it's a creative world, it's like I wasn't being that creative really. And then also like that leads to being more physically ill because you get burnout. It's like a mental thing that leads to a physical thing, isn't it?
And self-confidence at the end of all of that as well.
Exactly.
Which shouldn't happen, but
yeah, it's true. It like grinds us down and then we become like so less confident in ourselves. And also just like the willpower, I think. For sure, You know, like I've been, because these industries that, you know, like marketing and PR and content creation, social media, they're all in the same bracket. Like I literally was the PR, the social media girl, the marketing girl, the gifting girl, you know, like now there's more job roles for that. But I ticked every box and got paid very little. But you burn out because you're having to do all these things that also are like, you're dealing with so many people, even if you are supposed to be focused on your screen all the time, there's still like 12 people in an office or 20 people in an office or whatever that you have to deal with. And that burnout leads to like physical and mental experiences that make us want to leave and work on our own terms, basically.
And that's why we're freelance.
Exactly. How do you think then, so being a freelancer and working in a male-dominated industry, it's so good to hear you say that, like, you feel like you're now the, you know, when people are coming to you, it's because you're the expert in that field, right? That must be so empowering. How is that? Like, how is that? Because I know you've talked about, like, having imposter syndrome before and also just being like, shit, how was it a year ago I was doing something and now I'm doing this? Tell me more.
It's crazy. It's a really nice feeling now because, like I said, people respect me and they've hired me for a reason. And what happened in my last job was actually my self-confidence and sort of belief in what I was capable of was very much sort of like stamped on by the men that I worked with. I worked with a couple of younger men who I was their manager and they just undermined me, disrespected me, went over my head. And my older male boss, who was also a bit of a dick. And the three of them together sort of caused this feeling in me that I just felt like I wasn't capable of doing what I do now. It was just through little things, like little sort of slights and tones and
like digs.
Yeah, it wasn't even like verbal stuff. Sometimes it's like they would say things that felt like were good and empowering to women or whatever, but then like they would create this culture behind the scenes of stuff that completely defied that and went against that.
So like how they talked about women.
Yeah, how they talked about women, and then just sort of I'm trying to think of examples. Like I don't want to go into it because it was a very traumatic experience.
Oh mate, how is it that we both had traumatic experiences with men in the sneaker industry?
Yeah, and it's like I think people don't realise how much like gaslighting and abuse of power kind of stuff goes on
massively
when you work in the industry.
Yeah.
And what happened to me was exactly that, but it ended up being super freeing in the end because I was like, great, this has led me to where I am now, which is amazing. But it's such a 180 to where I am now as to where I was a year ago, because I'm doing, like when I started, what I'm doing now that I'm getting paid great money to do by great brands, I was unsure that I could even do a year ago, which is crazy because they were hiring me for experience. But it's like I knew I already had that experience. I just didn't have the confidence because the people that I worked with constantly questioned it or undermined it.
Men don't want you to be successful.
No, they don't. I mean, some men there are the odd men who are fantastic.
I should say some, because
but
the thing is
majority,
and the right men know that when we say that, we don't mean all men.
Yeah.
It's like saying that, you know, racist people suck. It doesn't mean that we're saying all people suck.
Yeah, literally.
Like, it's just the fact that there are incredibly inherently sexist men, and unfortunately, to be honest with you, right down to even women can be incredibly sexist. You know, the patriarchy has completely ruined all of us. Yeah, it's so deep within everybody. Yeah. And when men get sort of like, I had a taxi driver the other night, and I was talking about just basically how it's scary, and I've had really bad experiences with taxi drivers before, and like quite abusive one once. I had to get out of the car and like, you know, and that's not even bad, you know, which is shit to say. And he was like, yeah, true. Like sometimes I get like, say a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and the boy is putting his girlfriend in a taxi and saying, oh, please make sure she gets home safe. And he was like, yeah, well, what do you expect I'm going to do? And I was like, that's not the right attitude to have though, because they don't know you. And unfortunately, I'm glad that man thinks like that, you know, the boyfriend, because we as women have to not trust everybody.
Yeah.
Right down to like, you know, you can be so trustworthy of anyone, your partner, your brother, your dad, but deep within us, I feel like we've always got a fear that we don't know, you know, that there could be something that we don't know about. And I don't mean cheating or stuff like that. I just mean like behaviors and thoughts.
Yes,
you know?
exactly. Yeah. It's a very tough place out there for women.
It is.
And
it is.
that's us speaking as like privileged white women.
Yeah,
so that's like the
1000%.
tip of the iceberg. So
Exactly.
It's pretty crazy. But
It fucking is, man.
Yeah,
Like it really is. And you know what? It's shit that I have to feel like, you know, we can bond over how these awful men in the sneaker world have treated us like crap and gaslit us and stuff. But I have had the same experience, and you know, and I'm older than you, and like I did it like before you. And the reason I did it was because there were men like that, and I was taking a stand to say, do you know what? I'm a woman. I do know about this stuff. I'm knowledgeable, probably maybe more than many of you.
Yeah.
And I want to prove that and show that. And I got to a level of success that some men in that industry found uncomfortable for them.
Yeah.
And they wanted to stop me from doing that. And it was pre-Me Too movement. And it got low-key like abusive, like scary.
Wow.
And it's horrible that luckily I'm a strong, like thick-skinned person. And it was not nice, but I kind of like moved a little bit out of sneakers and streetwear. Like I never left it, but I was just like, I'm a fashion stylist.
Yeah.
And I'm going to focus on like, you know, other parts of the fashion world.
Yeah.
And kind of slowly move back into sneakers and streetwear. But it's really crap that like, because really that benefited me, just like you're like, because I was like, cool, well, I'm going to go higher. I'm going to go
and thrive.
Exactly.
But it's
like,
sad the way you had to do it.
Yeah. Exactly. And it sucks, but it is always the way that I think, sure, there are some people that unfortunately that doesn't work with, you know, as in like they don't come out better from it.
For sure.
But more often than not, women, we're like, you know, strong-willed, I think, more than anything, whether we're strong, like thick-skinned or not, we're strong-willed.
100%.
And, you know, if we've got somewhere, there's a reason we've got there in the first place for certain men to be angry at us for being there. So it usually works out that we do better for it, which
definitely,
is so ridiculous of them because
literally,
cool, bro, I'm just going to go and thrive here now.
Yeah.
So, coming back to when you were younger, because you're an artist, you're a painter, and I think, like, obviously, when I first knew you, you were like in a content role, right?
Yeah.
I knew you were a sneakerhead, like a sneaker fan, however you want to put it. But I didn't know much about your art to begin with, and then like knowing you, following you on social media, seeing all of that kind of happen more, right? And you post about it more.
Yeah.
At school, was that like your favorite subject?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was all I was good at. I
Right.
didn't do sports. I wasn't very smart. I mean, I was good at like English and stuff, but I didn't really know how to apply myself in any subject other than art. That was like where I excelled. And I was always like the best in my class at painting and drawing because I can draw quite realistically. So that was always something that I just remember was like my thing growing up, art and music. I played like 3 instruments and then did my art and those were my things. So,
Amazing.
but yeah, so that was kind of that. And then I went to uni to do fine art and I got a degree in fine art.
Amazing.
So yeah.
Where did you go to uni?
Dundee in the east coast of Scotland.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was where my mum's from, so I went back there for uni, and it was a really nice place to be at uni actually, and yeah, it was good.
A lot of like greenery around you.
Kind of. It was on the river, so it was more like it's kind of an industrial town, but it's on the coast, and it's close to everything in Scotland is close to greenery, to be honest.
Yeah.
Unlike London, where you have to go like 2 hours to see it.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was good.
I've been to quite a lot of Scotland, but I don't think I've ever been to Dundee.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I don't know
they've
what
got
it's
a
like.
V&A museum there, and
Have
they're like
they?
the city of design or something. So
Oh, wow.
it's like an underrated place,
Okay.
especially for creatives. But
Interesting.
yeah.
I love those underrated places.
Yeah.
I got into a very good uni, and at the time for the course was one of the best, Man Met for fashion design.
Wow.
And I left and I went to Newport in South Wales, which is a shithole. I love you, Newport, but they all agree. Love to hate it. I love South Wales.
Yeah.
And I had one of my best friends was doing, like from school, was doing art in Cardiff. And I had a boyfriend that was from like the outskirts of Cardiff at the time. So I'd visited it a lot and I loved it. And I love Manchester, but there was just something that it was just lacking in creation, the course that I was doing. I was in these really like new modern halls that had no character.
Yeah.
The people I was living with were like not friendly. And the only things I was good at school were music and art, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, mostly. They were like my best subjects. And I wanted to do fashion just because I don't know, I was like, do I go do art or do I do fashion? I felt like it was different. Like I'd been doing art as like my main thing my whole life, basically. And but then I wanted to be creative with it. Like I had gotten in because I had basically made a bunch of like handmade stuff at home, right? And then they put me in this class that was like, here's a white piece of paper and you're going to design a dress and then you're going to make it for Topshop and then you're going to work for Topshop. And I was like, this isn't me. Like, so I went, it was called Carleon where I went to uni, which is the outskirts of a place called Newport. And it was beautiful. Like it was hills and like greenery, and it was so creative because like it's not a wealthy area. And I feel like, and I found that is where the most creativity is, you know, like I love the city, don't get me wrong, I'm very much a city girl and I love London and I love Cardiff for that reason. So like as soon as I could move to Cardiff, I did when I was at uni. But I don't know, it feels like the more as shit as it is, you know, like less, not even deprived, but like when there's physically less going on around you. Because I grew up very lucky, like in the Cotswolds, which is a very privileged area, beautiful. But I was so bored, you know, like as a kid, I loved it. Yeah. But from a creative perspective, it made me really creative because I was like, well, I'm bored, so I'm going to like spray paint this thing or like sew this thing. Yeah. And I think that those places actually like, I think I'm glad, even though it was not recognized for fashion design particularly, I did so much more when I was there, you know, creatively speaking. Yeah,
it goes to show the power of the environment that you're in.
Massively.
And what people sort of gravitate towards and thrive within.
Yeah. I feel like as well, Scotland, this is a very big generalisation because it's a big place, and Wales, again, generalisation because it is a big place. But there's so many artists and musicians specifically coming from both of those places. So many bands from Scotland.
Yeah, for sure.
So many bands from Wales.
Yeah.
And of course, London is like where we can have our careers, right? It's where we can thrive. But I feel like as young creatives, actually, there's more interesting things going on in those like out of big city area or like... they're still like Cardiff's still a big city. Do you get what I mean? But they're just not London.
Yeah, exactly. I think anywhere in the UK that's not London, but I think a lot of these cities, like the smaller cities, have such incredible subcultures and like moments going on. And also because you're kind of like a big fish in a smaller pond, if that's the right word to say. Like when you've got a little thing going on, you can really like rally people around you and create something really exciting in smaller cities, whereas in London it's much harder to do.
It's so much busier here.
Yeah.
Like people, it's hard to live in London. It's expensive. And I say that knowing that I was a broke artist and musician when I lived in Wales, right? Like I was kind of like had like a clothing line, like a MySpace thing back in the day.
Yeah, cool.
And I was like a broke musician as well.
Yeah.
Doing all the creative things, and like I had a full-time job, but I never had money.
Yeah.
Like, even though it's cheaper to be there, I was still always broke. But then I always wanted to be in London because I knew that I could make more of myself here. Yeah. And I'm only now in my 30s making money that feels like I can actually like enjoy it. You know what I mean? But I still love it here. So it's weird, isn't it? Because like, it took me a lot to leave Wales. Like I really, really had found myself there when I was there. And from a creative perspective, like you say, I think because it is a lot cheaper, say like putting on a gig, right? Like it costs so much money, but in a cheap city, it costs so much less. People start their careers in these places that like have less going on in them because you want to create some kind of environment that's fun, like for people to be involved in.
For sure, yeah.
And everyone wants to help each other, you know?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you're an up-and-coming graphic designer. Can you, like, do this poster for me? And, like, you know, I'll pay you 20 quid or whatever. But, like, you're happy to get that 20 quid.
Exactly.
In London, there's a million graphic designers, a million music promoters. You know, like, everyone's trying to fight for the same thing. And the opportunities are here. Yeah. The brands are here.
Yeah.
The money is here, but it is also hard, isn't it? Like, why do we put ourselves through this? But both you and me have moved further out, right? Like you don't live central, do you?
Yeah, I live in Putney, so I'm sort of southwest.
Yeah.
Like 30 minutes from Oxford Circus.
Yeah,
but
not bad. It's not like far, but
it doesn't feel like London. It feels like a nice sort of, I don't know, Putney's quite like posh and safe and there's not much going on there, but I like it because there's nice parks I can walk my dog at and just have a little bit of air. I don't think I could ever live in like East London or somewhere that's super busy. So
I can't. I've done it all. I've lived everywhere. I've literally lived on Brick Lane, which I did my life. Yeah, terrible. Juice, if you're listening to this, it was when you were throwing rocks at my window at 3 a.m. that I realised that I shouldn't. No,
sounds like Juice.
No, I loved it. Do you know what I mean? Like at the time, it's actually like great that my friends could do that.
Yeah.
But then it just became ridiculous. Like I couldn't sleep. It was so noisy.
Yeah. It's
horrible.
it's for a certain time in your life when you can hack it and then
we
grow up and we're like, I need peace.
Exactly. I live on the outskirts of North London and I love it. And it's so much greener. And it's still London. And again, I can get to Piccadilly in like 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's fucking great, to be honest. But I feel like creatives, if you're working from home, more often than not, you're going to enjoy that kind of environment more.
Yeah, exactly. You want to live somewhere that you can have a really nice, like, balanced life and... Yeah, exactly. Rather than being in a smaller, more stressful, busy place.
Exactly.
So,
You don't have, like you were saying earlier, that culture of like, you know, being in an office surrounded by all these people.
Yeah.
But I think when you're doing that, I lived in Brick Lane and I worked 5 minutes away, right?
Yeah.
My office is 5 minutes away. And that was fine because I'm just coming home to my flat. But when you work from your flat, you want an environment that like is quiet, is chill because you are there all the time.
Exactly.
And you do need to focus.
Yeah.
It's crazy how different it is going like, I don't know, it's really like just a 20-minute difference or 15-minute difference from like where I previously lived like in Holloway, right?
Yeah.
Which was much busier. And although the road I lived in was relatively quiet, there's still sirens. It's central London. Like, it's such a difference. Before we wrap this up, I just want to ask you a bit more about work. And you have worked with, right, tell me, because I know you've worked with Nike, obviously. Like, I've been there, I've come to the events. Foot Patrol recently.
Yeah.
What are some of the other brands that you've worked with, like, as a freelancer that has just been, like, incredible?
Loads of different ones. I think Nike and Foot Patrol have been my favourite projects.
Yeah.
I've worked with Adidas recently as like talent rather than as like a creative, which was really fun. I was like, oh my God, this is like how the other half live. Usually I'm the person behind the scenes on the set that's like getting the talent ready.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who else. I feel like I've worked with so many that like they all just like blend in.
It's true, it is like that, and that's not in like a negative way. It's just more like it's you're constantly on the go, and you have to focus so much, I think, on each job. That when you're on the next one, it's like you can't think about what you just last did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but Nike must be a dream come true, right?
I think Nike has been the best partnership that I've had because there's not really many rules and they just let me do my own thing, and they approached me, which is the nicest thing as a creative when you're approached to bring your true authentic style and self to the project rather than them asking you to do something specific.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I've worked with them so many times now on like loads of lovely things that I feel really passionate about and was able to just kind of go free. Like they were like, there's no brief, just do your thing. And that's been lovely. So yeah, every single aspect of that has been great.
That's so cool.
I think, yeah. And then I think the Foot Patrol one has been like a big moment for me because obviously I've done stuff with them in the past, but this is the first time I've like art directed and done like a whole campaign for them. And it was just really nice. It was a very full circle moment because it was for International Women's Day. It's obviously something I'm so passionate about. But the whole project from start to finish was just the most incredible experience. And my last year's International Women's Day was completely like tainted by the male colleagues I had who were, they kind of like tore the soul out of it, and the whole experience was horrible. And so from going from that to this one this year for a brand that I like have so much respect for was just like such a dream come true.
It's also so nice, like as someone else that's been in this industry, like the sneaker world for so long, and as a woman, honestly, when we started, and it's true, so I'm sure they won't mind me saying, but it was because there was friends of ours, right? Like me and Juice, we used to have this blog for people that don't know what I'm talking about, called The Unisex Mode. And the reason I started it was because we had these friends that had another blog, and they were guys, and they wrote about sneakers and streetwear all day, and they would like go for dinner with us, but like, okay, we're going to this Foot Patrol event. We were like, we want to come to the Foot Patrol event. Like, we care about this stuff too. So I started a blog, and then it quickly became like Me and Juice, because we were like, well, there's no women talking about this, and we don't want it to be like women, you know, like, you know, from a woman's perspective, like just like sexualizing ourselves almost. We were like, no, we're women, but we think in the same way as you. We like the same things as you. So we want to make this unisex. Yeah. And it was Foot Patrol, I promise you, that made us do that. But not like, there were other reasons that were like, I was angry about. I wasn't angry about Foot Patrol, but it's more that it was just so focused on men. We had this like iconic small sneaker store that had so much history, so much heritage. And like, we know about that, you know what I mean? And we were like, we want to come to this book signing, or, you know, we care about this sneaker release, but like, it was never in our size. Yeah. And that's changed so much.
100%.
Which is amazing. Yeah. And to be fair to them, like Jimmy from Foot Patrol is like, he's from Cardiff, right? So I know him. I've like known of him for years. And when I moved here, he's kind of like an icon in like the OG sneaker world, right? Yeah. And I would always go in and be like, do you have a 5.5? I'm lucky I can wear a 5.5 sometimes, right? And there would always be like one, and he'd kind of like keep it aside sometimes for like the right people or whatever, you know. And so I always respected that. But obviously Juice is like a 4.5. Yeah. And it's taken so long. So to see like you have a whole campaign, and I know that they weren't ever like segregating us. Like their perspective was that like they didn't have the market for it. Yeah. And it was always there. Yeah. There were always my female friends queuing up for the releases, you know, for like the Asics Foot Patrol releases, all those kind of things. But it was just like, well, if you don't have the shoe for us, you're not going to see us because exactly, you know. Yeah. So to see that.
Great progress for sure. Because even I remember when I first moved to London, I just found Foot Patrol a really intimidating store to go into in general, because it was always just like cool guys. Yeah. Like sneakerhead dudes that just like would be like looking at you and they'd be like, why are you in here? And to go from that to like how they are now, and seeing like women working in the store. The men that I've worked with there, specifically Bradley, is the biggest ally. Like so cool. It's just really lovely to see like that completely changed now.
That's so nice.
And that's just the beginning as well. So
that is good. Like I've met him a few times, like events and stuff. I don't know him super well, but like, we know of each other. Yeah. And everything I hear about him is usually from women, and like telling me good things about him.
It's because he's such a rare find. Like in the sneaker world, he's not all talk. Like he's genuinely like is a great example of an ally to women in sneakers, and it's a very rare thing to find.
It's so sad, because I know that there will be men that might, well, whether they bother listening to this or not, but like that know us, that will be like, oh, I'm great. Listen, there are lots of nice men in the sneaker world, but I'm going to, you know, and I would say this to their faces, I'm going to call you out. Like, you don't have our backs. There are men that I went to when I was like literally getting bullied by like a man in the scene. And it was because it was pre-Me Too, you know, just like a few years ago, really, when you think about it all. But pre that movement, it was like hard for people to like take me seriously. It was just like, what, do you have like history with him? Like, have you dated him? No, I haven't dated him. I don't have history with him. He doesn't like that I'm successful. You know what I mean? Yeah. They always had to, which is really sexist in my opinion, you know, go, oh, but is there another reason? Yeah. You know, that you're not telling me.
It's always questions.
It's always questions.
Whereas if you're a man and you're like, I'm a sneakerhead, I like sneakers, people are like, yeah, cool. Yeah. But as a woman, you get questioned or undermined, or you're like, well, what, do you know anything about them?
Oh, and like, does your boyfriend love sneakers? You know, is that why you're wearing it?
Yeah. It's interesting talking about Me Too, though, because I think that was such a powerful moment in obviously culture in general. But it's so funny now to see that has kind of died down and the men have gone back to like not supporting. So like this year, International Women's Day was like screaming into a void, and it was literally just like women who were talking about it. It's like, we know that women support us. We all support each other. Like, we don't need to share that anymore. Yeah, like that's a given. But we need men to actually be like, okay, it's time for us to step up. But because like they're off the hook almost, it's like, let's stop.
Honestly, I have male friends that I know have the best of intentions, and I have male friends that do talk about like women's rights. Yeah, like, you know, wrap it up like that. And when they might say something to me like, oh, you know, this is happening on Wednesday, and like, you're going to come to this, and I'll explain that actually that's really late at night and I've got to come back on my own, and I've got 3 things that day. And if I didn't, maybe I'd just get like a taxi, but I'll be exhausted and I'll be traveling late at night on my own. And I know you don't have to think about that, but like, I'm not trying to say I don't want to see you and hang out, but like, unfortunately, this is something I have to think about.
Yeah.
And they'll respond with, but I post about this stuff all the time. Like, I know that, like, I get it. And I'm like, this wasn't an attack. Like, this is me explaining my life that you don't have to think about.
Yeah.
And like I say, they're the best, you know, meaning people. I know that they're saying that because they're like, I do understand, but it's like everything always is taken that way.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's hard because we can only compare, you know, like these things, you know, being a woman and having sexism, right? Like it's not comparable to other issues that people have, but that's the only way you can look at it to like understand how other people feel with other issues they have, whether they're disabled or, you know, our privileges being white women, for example, all these things, like you have to step outside of yourself. So someone accused me, or not accused me, but like talked about, for example, oh, it's really hard for me actually to get there because I'm in a wheelchair. I wouldn't go, oh yeah, I understand. I go, fuck, of course.
Yeah.
Like that shit, I don't have to think about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that isn't my reality. And like, fuck, is there anything I can do to help? You know?
Yeah.
More often than not, though, I'm not met with that by men.
Yeah,
and I know it's not all men.
Yes,
just to put that out there.
literally.
I know it's not all men, and I know that often it's just the way they've been taught.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
We could go on about this for hours.
Literally.
But yes,
Literally. It's a very hard subject, and I think the topics that I've just discussed are also hard to talk about in terms of like, I do think racism's worse than sexism, and obviously if you're a black woman, you're getting it way worse than us.
Yeah.
You know, these things are complex, but we can only talk about our experiences and try to advocate for others.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Absolutely.
Anyway, thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Of course.
I've appreciated
Thanks for the great
your time.
chat.
Yeah, it's been great. And thank you. And if you want to find out more about Titi, I will put all her links on social media and go and follow her and check out her art. Peace out.
Thank you.